The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Lunch and Learn series. We're up to Unit 3 today, so welcome wherever you are. I hope I'm coming across loud and clear. Let me know if I'm not, if there's something wrong with the audio. Incidentally, someone asked me last time about how you ask questions. Now, if you go to the right-hand side, if you've got a little arrow there, you can open that up and it opens up a menu, if you like, and there's a little question box there. You open that question box up, all you've got to do is type in your question, and I'll get to see that question the moment it's typed in, and you click send. No one else gets to see it, and obviously I can respond to it the moment I get it. So that's the way we engage in this process. I can't unmute everybody. As you can imagine, it would just be too noisy and distracting for everybody else. All right, so we're going to talk about an interesting topic today around the visioning and purpose conversation to improve engagement. So let's get underway, and let me talk a little bit about last time we met. Now, 2 weeks ago, you might recall, if you were here, of course, if you weren't, you might have looked at your, in the learning platform, you might have gone in and had a look at the information. But we basically looked at the GROW model, which is a great model for coaching. And GROW standing for goal, reality, options, and what next. And you can see it on your screen there, of course. And the whole purpose of that was to give you another opportunity to have a coaching conversation with another person. So I hope you had a chance to do that between last time we met and now. And if you have and you'd like to tell us about it, go to the question box and type in your message, and I'll be delighted to receive that message. Now, it's easy to use. It puts the focus and the attention on the other person, so it's not just you doing all the talking. Actual fact, what you're doing is you're asking a lot of questions to engage the other person, and that's precisely the reason for doing that. All right, so let's move on, and I hope, and the idea is, of course, if you haven't used it, find an opportunity to use it. Sometimes you don't even know when you can use it. In other words, it's going to creep up on you. It's one of those corridor conversations that you might have, or it's something that you didn't expect. So it's not necessarily something that needs to be planned. So let's have a look at the program and where we've come from and where we're going. And you'll notice that we've talked about the authentic leader in Unit 1, and then we considered the 5 conversations framework, and I hope you've been using those for your check-ins regularly with your team members. Sorry, I said Unit 3. This is actually Unit 4. Last time we met, of course, we talked about the GROW model, which I've just covered, and today, of course, we're going to talk about the visioning and purpose conversation to improve engagement. And so let's get stuck into that exercise today. So there's 3 things I'd like to talk about today. Ultimately, I'd like to talk about management of distraction. And the truth is that we're living in an age, of course, where we're bombarded with information left, right, and centre. And that information, of course, is getting in the way, if you like. And what it means, of course, is that it's very easy for us to go off track, and we can start working on things that are perhaps not relevant to what we really should be doing. So, as the great management consultant Warren Bennis reminded us, that the biggest challenge of the 21st century is the management of distraction. And I think he's right, and it's about trying to keep people focused, and that's one of the reasons why we need to have these visioning conversations with people, so that we can make sure that they're clear about why they're doing what they're doing and, how they need to go about it. I'll obviously talk about some tools around how you can do that and have those conversations with people. And these, again, are conversations that may not necessarily be planned. They might come out of, some observation that you might make with someone else where they're clearly not working on the thing that they should be working on. And I'll finish up talking about the Team Values Charter, which I think is a brilliant system that you can use to have a conversation with your team, in fact, and to get them all on the same page in relation to what you're expecting from them. And so I'll spend a bit of time talking about that as well. So that'll take us through. So let's start the ball rolling. And I just want to make the point that time management is not the problem. You know, we all hear about time management programs, and I wish I could get an extra hour in my day, and I wish I could learn to manage my time more effectively. That's not the problem. It's actually distraction management. That's the real problem. The problem for us is to make sure that we stay on purpose. And that's a very difficult task for you as a manager or a team leader, because clearly you've got a lot of things going on at once, and you're being bombarded, as I mentioned, from all sorts of directions. Sticking to the script, if you like, or what you're supposed to do is not that easy. Now, if you're not finding that easy, then obviously the people that you lead are probably finding it even more challenging. So the purpose of these conversations, of course, is to make sure that people are in sync with the purpose of what should be done. And so the whole purpose of the visioning conversation is to make sure people understand the why I'm doing what I'm doing. So it might look like a mindless report or something like that, but in actual fact, it's got a strong purpose and is required to be done. So really, it's not time management that needs to be managed, it's distraction that needs to be managed. And in any organisation, that's always going to be a challenge. We attend mindless meetings, spend laborious hours on emails that are perhaps not really all that relevant. We have wasted conversations with people. A lot of our day is chewed up by things that are distractions from the core purpose of what we're there for. So ultimately, it's an important conversation to have with people. So let's talk a little bit about this. I mentioned before that Warren Bennis, who's a great management consultant, did say that the management of distraction was one of 4 key competencies of 90 of the top business and public sector leaders in the USA. So being able to stay on purpose is critically important for you as a leader, but it's also very important to make sure that everybody else in the team stays on purpose as well. And that's a really, really difficult task, as you know. So investing intentional attention where it matters leads to effective communication. So the more we can focus on what we need to be doing, the more effective we're going to become. And you know, and I know, when we come home at night and we've been spinning our wheels all day, it's normally because we've been bombarded with a whole lot of distraction that, quite frankly, hasn't led to any resolution of what we're supposed to be there to do. And this becomes a problematic. So everything we say, think, and do has to be very much on purpose. And as a leader, getting your team to focus on that is really important. It's impossible to eliminate it totally. That is, distractions, of course. But what we try to do is to minimize it to a point where it's manageable. And that's the point I want to make there. So attention is actually a discipline. It's like everything else. You know, exercise is a discipline. Meditation's a discipline. Whatever it is that you do is a discipline, no doubt. But the one for most of us is a constant struggle. So being able to find time to focus is critically important. So that's a bit of background and rationale, if you like, as to why we are focusing on this really important conversation of a visioning conversation and an encouraging conversation. Now, Simon Sinek wrote a brilliant book several years ago called Starts with the Why. And ultimately, his whole essence of that book was that the why of work is the critically important aspect of what we do. And one of the most useful diagrams in his book was the one that you can see in front of you, where you've got these series of concentric circles, and on the outside it's the what. So what we do is pretty straightforward. You only have to look at your job description and it'll tell you what you're supposed to be doing. So the what is not a problem. We all know what we're supposed to be doing. Where the problem starts to emerge is how do we do what we're supposed to do, which is the next the next circle. So the how do we go about our work, which of course is the technical skills that we have to do our job. But the big thing that Sinek talks about that's missing in all of this is the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? I mean, we've all been in a case where we've filled out paperwork, or we've done a mindless report, or a report that seems pretty dull and boring, or we've attended a meeting that we don't understand what its purpose is. We've all been there. And I think part of a good leader's job is to remind people of why they're doing what they're doing. And I'm going to share with you a couple of little cases around that that might help you to understand how you might frame those conversations and comments with people. If people understand why they're doing what they're doing, then they become a little bit more engaged in what they're doing. If they don't understand why, then of course they become disengaged. It's just seen as an isolated task that's got no relevance to anything that people do. So ultimately it's about reminding people about the why they do what they do. Now, and we've got a few people here, but if you're from the not-for-profit sector, for example, sometimes that's a little bit easier. The why is easier because if you're working for a charity or something like that, it's fairly evident why you're doing the work you're doing. It might be for homeless people, or it could be some sort of important societal cause. It's fairly clear the why. But even then, you've still got to be reminded why you're doing what you're doing. If you're working in government, for example, sometimes that can be very much the waters can be blurred quite a lot because we're doing tasks over and over again and we forget the reason that we're doing that. It might be to help the community become more effective, our local community or whatever it is. We need to keep reminding ourselves of why. And it's not just you, of course, it's also your team as well. So I highly recommend you read that book. There's another book by Dave Ulrich called The Why of Work, which is also a very powerful read if you're interested in reading. All right, so here are some questions that you can ask around the visioning conversation that you can address. And I think, these are questions that you might help you to remind you of why doing what you're doing actually counts. Because obviously it does. Because if you didn't do it, there'd be some sort of a consequence, undoubtedly. So why is what I'm doing important? Now, of course, you can ask yourself these questions, but it's also important for you, of course, to convey this information to those people that in your team that might be a little bit disengaged and they're not quite there on the task that they're doing. So what's important and what's not? Could you answer that? What's changed in the work that you do that's critically important? Where are we headed? What's the key message about where we're headed? What do I need to do now and in the future? Those things are questions we don't normally ask ourselves because we just push from pillar to post. We're on to the next big thing and we don't think about it. We just see it as a routine task that has to be done. But ultimately, what you're doing, or should be doing, of course, is adding some value to what's already there. And the only way you can add value is to actually, or at least appreciate how you can add value, is to understand why you're doing what you're doing. So there's some questions that you might like to consider around that. Now, as I said before, this is a great read. Another one of Simon Sinek's books reminds us in his book, Start with the Why. Sorry, it's the same book. How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. And he says in this book, which I think is a great statement, it doesn't matter what you do, it matters why you do it. Now, what he means by that, of course, is he's not suggesting that you shouldn't do it properly, but the key point about why we do what we do is it. So and often it's not something directly. So it's where people are doing things indirectly to achieve a benefit. So, for example, if you're in local government, we've got a lot of people in local government here, a lot of things that you do in local government are indirect to the end result, which of course is about servicing the community that you live in, the region. It may not be obvious to you, that you're doing something that doesn't actually directly link to that. So occasionally we need to stop and remind ourselves of what we're doing, because ultimately, and local government's a good example, ultimately everything we say, think and do should ultimately be in the best interest of the region to which we are part of. And sometimes it's not easy to see that, but it's important to at least acknowledge what that is. Otherwise, we kind of just lose our whole engagement and our purpose because we forget why we're doing what we're doing. And having conversations with people about that is important. Don't assume that people actually know the why. I think it's fair to say you can assume that they know to do the what, and obviously if they don't have the technical skills to do the what, then that would be a place to start. But ultimately, if people can do the what, then the question is really what the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? Why are we attending this meeting? Why are we putting together this project plan? Why are we attending this meeting? Why are we attending to this email? Why are we responding to this ratepayer's requests? What is going on? We can remind ourselves of the ultimate answer to that question. So Simon Sinek's book does talk a lot about the why of work, and I think it's very, very relevant to what we're talking about today. So let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. And this is a commercial example. I want you to imagine a production area, and I want you to imagine in this production area that there's sort of 3 shifts, and in this production area, the manager comes into the production area, and the shift is just about to finish. So we might say it's a very late hour or early morning hour. Let's say the shift finishes at 2 a.m. So it's a late hour. People are tired. They've finished their shift. They want to go home. And as the manager, you pull somebody up from that shift, and you ask them to sweep the floor. Now, you wouldn't normally, this is not normally something that you would ask them to do, but you ask them to sweep the floor. Now, you could imagine that request is probably not going to be received in a positive sort of way, because the person's probably just can't wait to get home, get some sleep. So if you said, I want you to sweep the floor before you leave, please, and you did it in a courteous way, well, they'll probably do it because they're being asked to do it. But what about if you said this to them, which is a true statement? You said, look, I'd like you to sweep the floor, please. I just want to explain why. We've got a new supplier coming in tomorrow morning. There's a meeting that we've got with them at 8 o'clock in the morning. And this supplier is considering very strongly shifting their product line to our business. And as a result of that, they wanted to do an inspection of our production area tomorrow morning. And I just wanted to give them the very best impression possible, so that hopefully what we could do is win their business. And by winning their business, it could be an opportunity for us to, secure jobs for the future and give everybody more scope and opportunity. Now, I don't expect the person on the end of the broom to be all excited about that conversation, but I think at the end of the day, at least they understand why I'm asking them to do what I want them to do. Now, so they've got context, they've got some clarity around what it is that you want them to do, not just what it is, but why. All right, so that's what I mean about the why. So, explaining to people the why, I think, is very relevant. Please don't assume that people know the why, because they often don't. Now, in this example, of course, the person on the end of the broom had absolutely no idea, because they've never been asked to do that before. They would have probably just thought about it as an annoyance. But obviously, once they've understood the why, they would have some clarity around what to do. So even on a very mundane job like sweeping the floor at 2 o'clock in the morning, you can still give people a sense of why. So those are the conversations that that I think are really important to have. And there's a myriad of examples that I give you around that, but that sort of gives you a sense of what it is. So spend time explaining why. And of course, you can do it the other way too. I mean, if one of your team members is producing reports and they're not very good reports, there's filled with mistakes and inaccuracies, and you're trying to convince them to write the report in the best possible way, you might try the approach of explaining the relevance and importance of that report for decision making for, say, other people. It's probably likely to be read by other people, hopefully, and I mean, otherwise, what's the point of writing it? And then when that report is read by other people, they may well make serious decisions about that. So, in effect, a report that might seem quite worthless is actually quite relevant and can be explained to the person in those terms. So, managers don't communicate purpose enough, I think, for two reasons. And I think they're very real reasons. I think one of the reasons that managers don't communicate purpose is basically because it takes extra time. So by having a conversation with someone around purpose or vision, obviously it takes a little bit of time to do that. So better off just to kind of give the instructions to get on and do whatever, and then I can move on and do the next thing. So I think part of it is a time issue. But I think the other part of it, which is a more dangerous assumption, is that people think that the person on the receiving end already gets it. They already understand the why. And I think this is a huge mistake. So I think as managers, it's not about being condescending either. You just need to explain to people the why, because not everybody has your line of sight between what they're doing and the end result. So therefore, I think it's important for you to not to make assumptions and to explain to people why you want it done and how it's going to impact on other aspects of the organisation as such. And that's the purpose of having those conversations. But as I said before, it's not necessarily going to be, people aren't necessarily going to be jumping out of their, they're not going to be jumping out of their chair with excitement, but the point is at least they've got a context, at least they understand. It's also showing respect for the other person as well. Because you've taken the time to explain to people the why, then people kind of get an idea that, hang on a minute, this is important because the manager's explained to me why it's important. They've gone through and explained the consequences. So that is a sign of respect as well. So don't think it's condescending. It's perfectly relevant for you to explain that to people. And of course, if you don't know why the exercise is important, then I think you should think about that before you share that with the other person. So, and I've touched on this just then, but so when you ask people to do jobs at a common place, it does show a sense of dignity to them by explaining the worth of the work that needs to be done. So I think this is an important point. So in actual fact, it's a sign of respect to have a conversation around purpose and vision with people because it shows that you do care. And it does show that that you can see the linkage between what people are doing and the end result. It's not a way of making an excuse. It's just to be able to explain to people the relevance and importance of it. Okay, so it's very, very dangerous and very easy to do to forget that people don't know or can't connect the dots between what you're asking them to do and the end result. So yes, it is a sign of dignity, and I think it's a fair and reasonable thing for people to do. And in fact, the more mundane the job might be, or the more drudgery that's involved in the job, for you to explain the relevance and importance of it, I think, is extremely important. It does show a sign of care and respect for the other person. Does anyone have any questions at this point that they'd like to ask at this stage? Anything at all that's come up so far? If you do, go to the question box, open that little orange tab up and go to questions, and I'll be happy to receive those. All good? Okay, let's keep moving. Right, so sharing a vision considers three key questions. Now, when I talk about vision, people's eyes usually glaze over and they say, why are you talking to us about vision and all the rest of it? A leader's job is to pave the way between what people do and the end result. They need to be able to see a line of sight between what they're doing and the end result. So, three key questions or three key considerations. Why does this job or this task or this project, whichever way you want to put it, make a difference? Why does it make a difference? Are you able to make a distinction between what it is they do and the big difference it makes? Because if you can't, then you can be assured that the other person can't, that's doing the job. So is there, in all likelihood, they're obviously not going to necessarily put in discretionary effort, if you like, to get the job done. The second question is, why is a team member's contribution important? So if you ask somebody, for example, to raise a point at a meeting this afternoon, let's say you had your team meeting this afternoon, you ask them if they could raise something in the team meeting, that's a task. But if you explained why, in other words, because I think it's important if you raise it that people can see that there are people who are concerned about this issue. Now, you're not asking people to do something they wouldn't normally do, but if you said, look, that's a good point you made, can you bring it up at the team meeting this afternoon? Because I think it's an important item that we all need to focus on in our team meeting in terms of being more effective at what we do. You could say that, and so you're letting the person know that their contribution's important. And then the third question you're really relating to is, why is it important to do it right and be accountable? Now, if people aren't doing their job correctly, it's going to have consequences. So you can talk to people about two things. If you're talking about them doing it right, then obviously you can talk about the benefits the end user will get from that. But if you're talking also about it where it goes wrong, you can talk about the consequences of that as well. All right. So inaccurate reports lead to poor decisions. Poor decisions lead to poor choices and waste of money and all sorts of other possibilities out of that. So you can see that you're thinking carefully about, why does this job make a difference? Why is this person's contribution important? And why is it important that they do it right? That's the essence of the conversation around visioning. That's really important. So it's not about sharing grandiose vision statements or anything like that. It's just really being able to create a connection between the day-to-day work that someone does and the end result, which is ultimately what that's about. All right. Look, another very, very powerful way of explaining the why is by using storytelling. Now, often people get sort of tune out at this point because they think to themselves, oh, look, I'm no good at telling stories. So what I want to do is share with you a story, a real story that I shared with one of, somebody I was mentoring basically, and I want to share this story with you so I could illustrate to you how powerful a story is, to sharing with that person, a purpose. Now, this person wanted to become a consultant. Now, I've been a consultant now for 20 years and thoroughly enjoy what I do, and I couldn't think of doing anything different. Frankly, I love what I do. But in the early stages, of course, there are some skills that you need. And of course, I was told that before I go out and see clients, I should investigate their business, find out a little bit about what they do, so that I can ask intelligent questions and come up with solutions that are tailored to the business's needs. Made a lot of, at one level it made a lot of sense. But at another level, I completely ignored that advice. And and you can imagine I'm talking to this protege now. I'm talking to this young mentee about this. So you can imagine I'm telling this story, and this is a true story. So I do recall getting this appointment with a managing director, or in fact, a general manager of a very large firm here in Brisbane. And so I remember arriving there. I remember parking my car in the visitor's space, and I remember talking to the reception and being ushered into the boardroom with this very impressive mahogany table. And I sat down, took my seat, got myself a glass of water, got my notes organised. I was waiting for the general manager to arrive. So I'm sitting there quietly in this very impressive office, and pen poised, ready to go, and the general manager came through another door, which obviously was connected to his office. And he walked up to me, and we did the obligatory handshake, and he said to me, we sat down, and I sort of started to launch into my sort of patter, and he stopped me mid-track, and he said to me, I'll never forget it, it just still makes me cringe when I think about it, but he said to me, "You don't know anything about this business, do you?" And just looked me straight in the eyes like I'm doing with you now. And I said to him, because I honestly didn't know a lot about the business. I mean, obviously I knew what they sold, but I had no idea about, some of the issues that they were facing and all the rest of it. So I couldn't really bluff my way through. And then before I had a chance to answer, he said to me, "Well, you're wasting my time. You've asked me for a meeting. I'm sitting down with you now, and you haven't even had the courtesy to find out how our business operates and what some of the challenges are that we're facing." Now, you can imagine at this stage I felt like crawling under the table. I really did. It wasn't a pleasant experience, as you can imagine. So all I could do at that stage is apologise to him, which I did, and I then followed up by saying or asking, if I go and do my homework, would you be prepared to meet me again? So I was trying to salvage a situation. Anyway, there wasn't a convincing yes to that, but needless to say, I never got a meeting with that person again. But he taught me a really brilliant lesson, although a painful lesson, and that was do your homework before you come and see me. So I shared that with my mentee, and I could have done a couple of things with him. I could have said to him, make sure you do your homework before you go and see your clients. Now, well, he would have probably done what I did and just ignored that advice. Or I could have shared, and I did share that story with him. Now, the story, of course, lingers. It's true. He remembers it. He could feel my pain, as you would undoubtedly have felt my pain when I explained the story to you. So my point is that stories are really powerful, and they're very good at conveying a strong message. So instead of me just lecturing them and saying, you need to do your homework before you go and see your client, I can share with him a painful experience that I went through, which illustrates clearly that I would never ever want to be put in that position that I was in. And so it's far more powerful. So storytelling, you don't have to be, articulate and, it's just tell them a story, particularly a story where you have messed up. They're even more powerful because there's a sense of humility that comes with that. And by sharing that with other people, they start to get the idea that perhaps I shouldn't make the same mistake that Tim made. So storytelling is very, very powerful. So what I want to do now is share with you an exercise that I'd like you to try, which is essentially part of your homework. And I call this a team values charter, and you can see at the bottom of the page there, this comes from one of my books, The New Influencing Toolkit, that I wrote 5 years ago. But it's a very relevant exercise. And so a team value charter is actually a powerful way of assisting your team to work together for a common goal. So you'll find that now, I know a lot of your organisations have corporate values and they have mission statements and all these kinds of things. I understand all that. But I think this is what I'm talking about here is this charter is about your team, right? So it's only about your team. And more importantly, it's only about how your team interacts with each other. So it'll only take you 20 minutes to do. It's not a big deal. You can tack this on to one of your next meetings, and you'll find that and I can only tell you this, you'll have to back yourself on this, but you'll find that people will respond really, really well to this. You'll be surprised. So how does it work? Let's have a look. Ultimately, what you need to do at this meeting is that you don't need to send these questions out to people beforehand, because you might as well just do it on the day. And you ask everyone if they could write down or record, whether it's, on an iPad or whatever it is, not an iPhone, that probably isn't ideal, but they actually write the answers down or record the answers to these questions. Why? Because I want them to actually think about the answers. I want them to take it seriously, and I want them to put pen to paper, so to speak, and come up with something. The other thing I'd say to you is it's important that you do this as well. So you might do this before the meeting, but nevertheless, you have your answers to these 4 questions as well. And you ask people once they're ready, and you ask them, the first question you ask them is this: what's one value that's important to you when you're working in groups and teams? Now, what I've done here is on the page, I've illustrated for you my answers to those questions. So my answer to that question, I might write down the word respect. To me, respect is really important when I'm working in teams. So I write that down. So I look around the table, and once I note that everybody's pretty much finished their answer, and of course it won't take long for them to write down one value, my second question is, what is your definition of that value? Now, if I was responding to that, I might write down this: respect is when people are prepared to listen to others, even when they may not agree with their point of view. Now, that's my definition of respect. I would imagine other people would have a different definition of respect, but that's my definition. All right, so they write down a definition, and then I look around, and once everyone's ready to go, question 3 is, why is that value important to you? Now, that's important because what I'm trying to do here is to try to understand my team members better. I need to understand what makes them tick, and that's a good thing. So I'd like to know why people have written down that value. So if I was responding to that question, I might say, I like to feel that I'm respected and my opinion's valued when working with others. So that's my answer to that question. Okay. Question 4. Now this is where the rubber meets the road. And again, I get people to write down the answer to this question. Question 4 is, what behaviours would be consistent with this value? All right, so I'm looking for, acts or behaviours or actions that would be consistent with that. Now, I might write down, if someone was asking me that question, I might write down not interrupting someone else when they speak. So, that's an action or a behaviour that would demonstrate a degree of respect for me. So I get everyone to write that down. So you'll find that won't take you too long, and people will get that down. They don't have to write an essay. It's just a simple exercise to do. And then what I do is I ask each person in my team to share with their colleagues the answers to those 4 questions. Now, I'll tell you now, you'll hear a pin drop. It'll go much better than you think. People will be absolutely into it. Initially, they might be a sigh or a groan, but you'll find that once this part starts, they'll be right into it. Now, you go around the room and you give everyone a chance to share their answers to those 4 questions. So this is a team conversation we're having now. And then what I'm doing is I also share mine as well, by the way. It's not just a case of me going around the table and I just sit there quietly and say nothing. I share mine as well because I'm part of the team. And so what I do, and of course what I might also do is I encourage other people to ask questions, to seek clarification, to make comment about anyone's value or the answers to those questions. So effectively what I've done now is I've got everyone to share with the rest of the team how they basically want to be treated in the team. That's why it's powerful. You're actually asking everyone how they want to be treated in the team. And then once you've done that, of course, the next step is to take the values that you've come up with and the answer to question 2, which is the definition, and you create what's called a team values charter. You actually literally create a charter. Now, if 2 people in the team, of course, have got the same value, great. You make sure that they both get together and make sure that their definition is compatible with both people in the team. So you make sure that everybody, has got their value, and they can only have one in the charter. And I've actually seen teams who've actually literally print them off, frame them, and put them on the wall of the meeting room. I know other teams that have actually put them on their agenda. So it just demonstrates to people that this is our team values charter. I've seen other people use them as screensavers. So people do take these seriously. And you might say, well, what's the difference between that and what's on the plaque on the wall? The big difference is that people don't argue with their own data. Because you've had a conversation with your team members about these things, they will completely and openly embrace it. What's more is you will find that they will tend to pull each other up when they believe that one of the values have been violated. So this is a fantastic tool for you as a team leader to hold your team members accountable, not just for what they do, but also the why. This is the values. So give it a shot. It works extremely well. You'd be surprised at how well this will go, but you just got to have the courage to do this. And you'll be amazed. I'm sure you'll come back to me and say, oh, I couldn't believe how that worked. It'll work really well, trust me. Okay, now, do we have any questions at this point before we move on? Any comments, any observations, anything that people would like to raise with me? Dare I say, how many are you going to have a go at having a conversation with your team about values? Maybe you might want to type something in there, but I hope you will do that, because ultimately that's your homework. I'd like you to complete a team values charter with your team. I'd like you to do that with your team. I'd like you to do that at your next meeting. I'd like you to publicise that charter, and I'd like you to try and hold people accountable to that charter by drawing to their attention the values that are important for the team. So that's another concept, and that's another way you can think about that. So hopefully you'll have a bit of fun with that. Now, please make sure that you go into your learning platform. You will get, not now, I have to upload it, but there'll be a copy of the slides and there'll be a copy of the recording that will go into the Team Values Charter. And so you'll get a copy of that. And also in the team values charter, also on the learning platform, there'll be a number of other bits and pieces that you can look at in terms of purpose. Excuse me, I've been doing a lot of talking. So there are a lot of things on that learning platform that you really should have a look at. So you'll get an email from me, not this afternoon because I'm in a workshop all afternoon, but I'll be sending you out an email over the weekend. And what that'll do is have the links to the other two webinars, and also, so make sure you do have a good look around there. There's some good resources there. So folks, that's it from me. Thank you very much for your engagement or involvement today. I hope I've helped you with that whole notion around purpose. And so you can see that next time we meet in unit number 5, we're looking at the encouraging conversations to build commitment. So we'll get into unit number 5. Hopefully you're continuing your one-on-ones with your team members using the 5 conversations framework. And then, of course, in unit 6, we'll look at the relationship building conversations. So that's it from me. Thank you, everyone. You've been very quiet today. I hope all is well with you. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And I hope you can go and have a look at that, have a peek at the learning platform and make sure you complete your homework. So thanks, everyone. We'll catch everyone in a fortnight. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.